Hi everyone, Al the Psych here. I have a video for you today for informational purposes only. I've entitled it Positive Therapeutic Alliance, and I've taken information from PsychNet. The article was the central role of the Therapeutic Alliance. Got information from CORC, C-O-R-C, psychotherapy.net, information from Scott Miller from there, the APA organization, a book of mine, uh, called, it's not my book, but that I own, Theory and Practice of Counseling and Psychotherapy. I've had that one for decades. Probably some other sources, and of course my own take. Okay, so let's get to work here. So it's interesting, there's a lot of little things that can make up for a positive therapeutic alliance or a PTA. So I went to Carl Rogers to start. And Carl Rogers is the father of client-centered therapy. And I took three important points from Carl Rogers. So here's those three. First, empathic understanding of the client's internal frame of reference. Second, unconditional positive regard helps to establish a safe, warm, tolerant, and accepting environment in the therapeutic setting. And third, congruence means that the therapist remains genuine, open, and honest throughout the therapeutic process. Okay. Now, personally, I don't think I can pull off all of these. I think it's probably more honest for me to say that I could sympathize rather than empathize, for example. It's very difficult to actually feel what another person uh, is feeling. Maybe you think this is the way a person is experiencing something, but maybe it's not. In my case, I think I probably more engage in sympathy rather than empathy. But having watched tapes of Rogers, he sure seemed like he pulled it all off. Anyway, it's probably not quite up to his par. Okay, now, I like the idea of setting parameters in therapy, especially going over issues like confidentiality, which I think is huge. And I think going over the areas that fall under confidentiality and do not fall under confidentiality are very important. And I think just letting the client know what those parameters are helps that individual feel more at ease. Okay. Now, although I didn't find information about this next point when I was searching for it, I also like to get housekeeping things out of the way. It's kind of like priming. So like things like being on time or paying on time, etc. All this I like to just typically go over that before really jumping into a therapeutic situation. And of course, typically there's paperwork kind of laying out the parameters of responsibilities. Um, but I think this housekeeping also applies to therapists. So if I, as a therapist, have expectations of the client, to be on time, pay on time, etc. I'm sure the client also has expectations of me, the therapist, in terms of showing up on time, and things like that. Um, and now, it's important to know just what the protocol is. So if I have to be late or if I have to cancel, what's the protocol? So that's important to know, from both sides. Now, I'm sure some people may think that it's not the best way to start a therapeutic alliance, getting into all this, housekeeping stuff. But I like the idea of getting certain things, out of the way. It's done. Everybody knows, the rules, so to speak. And personally, I think it sets the tone that this relationship that we're going to be starting is important. Okay, it's not just a couple of friends getting together to shoot the breeze. Okay, it's more than that. There's work involved. Now, research indicates that a more mutual collaborative approach to therapy can benefit the alliance. And in my mind, this means more buy-in, from the client, because the client is actively participating in what's going to take place. So it's not a dictatorial sort of situation. Um, and besides, getting buy-in means less likelihood of the client dropping out of therapy. Okay, so I think that's really important. Sometimes you hear about, therapists and have a great track record using this particular type of technique and things like that. But what you don't always know is that maybe there's been a big dropout rate, and those dropout numbers have not been calculated in the figures that are being thrown out there. Okay. Now, I do like the idea of priming. I mentioned priming earlier. So basically, this is letting the client know that I, as therapist, is what I like to do. I may occasionally gently challenge, irrational beliefs, or maybe just not totally agree with what's being presented, and I, would gently challenge at times. And then, of course, homework would be something that I would, often be assigning in a therapeutic situation. And of course, I would want to hear from the client too. What do you think about the homework? Is this something you're actually going to do? Is there an issue here? Is there pushback? And this would be, if there's some resistance, that would be an area of exploration. Okay. Of course, as therapists need to be flexible, to, individuals that are different, different than me, the therapist, in terms of culture or race or religious beliefs, etc. That's just should go without saying. Now, I like the idea of getting feedback from the client to see how the alliance is doing. Now, I used to do this on a very informal basis, but some therapists use what's called the session rating scale. And this addresses 4 things. Number 1, the relationship. 2, goals and topics. Okay. 3, the approach or method. And 4, just, the overall feel there. So at the end of a session, that the client would rate if 1, if he felt heard, understood, and respected. 2, if he and the therapist worked on or talked about what the client wanted to work on or talk about. And 3, if the therapist's approach is a good fit for him, the client. And 4, if there was something missing in the session that day. Okay. So doing this, I think, really helps kind of home in on what's going right and what's not going right. And what I, as a therapist, might need to do is to, make the process more effective. Okay, so I hear from the client, I hear, what his concerns are, and, I have to hear and think, okay, is this something that maybe I'm going to have to make some adjustments on myself? Okay. Sometimes the fit is just not right, and maybe I'm not going to be able to meet the needs of this particular client, and maybe a referral needs to be made to another therapist, to a therapist that might do a better job, might be a better fit for this particular client. I don't want the client just to not show up and then have to kind of struggle to find another individual. Maybe I could at least assist with that. On the other hand, this information, maybe it helps both of us kind of, if we've got some little kink in the relationship, maybe this helps us work through it. And being able to work through it would actually be something that hopefully would generalize to other situations out in the real world. So there's so much that can go toward a positive therapeutic alliance, as I started thinking about it. So what I wanted to do is kind of put out some information about what I think is important, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things that could be important too, and I'll let you kind of think about what those things are that I didn't include. Okay, thanks.